Live Travel.
5 Live Breakfast.
Rachel Burden and Rick Edwards.
Good morning, welcome to 5 Live Breakfast with Rick and Rachel. Let's return to that top story in the news there then. NHS England have confirmed that children will no longer routinely be prescribed puberty blockers at gender identity clinics. The decision comes after a review found there was not enough evidence they are safe or effective. Puberty blockers, which pause the physical changes of puberty, will now only be available as part of research. Fewer than 100 young people in England are currently prescribed them on the NHS. Hannah Barnes is Associate Editor at The New Statesman and author of Time to Think, which is a book about Tavistock's gender identity service. Morning, Hannah.
Good morning, Rick.
This was a decision that I think we were expecting, but it's gone slightly further than maybe we anticipated.
Yeah, that's right. So, NHS England has signalled its intent in this area for quite some time, and it consulted on it last summer that it intended to only prescribe puberty blockers as part of research. But this has gone further. So one of the things that it was considering was allowing clinicians working in these new services, which will open on the 1st of April, these new gender services that will replace the Tavistock service, to sort of refer young people onto any forthcoming research on an exceptional basis. Now, that is not going to happen anymore. So that route has been closed, and instead it will be much, much harder. So there is still a sort of an exceptional cases route, but it has to go through a centralised system that is run generally by the NHS, and you'll have to make a really strong case as to why this individual is exceptional. But I think the most significant thing really is that the new gender services will really have no role in puberty blockers whatsoever. There will be no medical offering. And what NHS England have said is that while there are plans and indeed, study protocols have been submitted for clinical research, if that does not get ethical approval for any reason, then it will not change their decision. So it could well be that there will be no puberty blockers prescribed on the NHS, for good. So they're saying it's
because
not,
the trials don't get clearance to go ahead, effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're some way off. The idea is, that they're going through all the right processes now, and it's hoped that if it does get approval, then they might be able to start recruiting young people to that study at the end of this year. But what NHS England have said is that regardless of what happens there, that is their decision, that there is not enough evidence to have them as a routine practice.
There are, as I mentioned, there's not many people in England currently who are prescribed them, so it's fewer than 100 young people. So it is affecting not that many, but it is worth saying that there are inevitably going to be some young people out there who are really disappointed about this.
Absolutely. But just to pick up on the first point, there have been around 2,000 young people who've been referred for puberty blockers over the last 10 years. So if you add it up, it is quite a lot. And we're talking about a really serious medical intervention. Mm-hmm. But you're absolutely right. This will be devastating to some young people and their families. And we've seen that in the reaction overnight from various, trans support groups. Because a treatment that was available will no longer be.
Is there going to be a route still to get hold of puberty blockers privately, online, whatever it is?
Well, that's the interesting question. So this NHS guidance and sort of a bit of a data dump that they did yesterday, really, it does say explicitly that this doesn't apply to the private providers, just simply because it falls out of the scope of NHS England. However, it makes it very clear that it is aware of no regulated private provider that could prescribe puberty blockers in the UK. So it's very strongly advising against that, and it says that there is no rationale to do so because of this systematic evidence review that has been undertaken, which has found that the evidence base just isn't strong enough to prescribe them for this context. So they'll still be prescribed to very young children who start puberty, who will take them for a very short period of time and then start their puberty as normal. But so I think they really have been very strong in saying that even though they are available and, privately and online and what have you, the evidence base just isn't there to support that.
What other alternatives are out there for kids who were considering getting puberty blockers?
Well, to be frank, the situation for young people experiencing distress around their gender is appalling. It's shameful right now. There are around 6,000 children and young people sitting on an NHS waiting list for care, and some of them have been sitting on that for 5 years and there's nothing, and that's really atrocious. And when the new services open on the 1st of April and the Tavistock's Gender Identity Development Service closes, they're not going to make a dent in that waiting list at all. So I think sadly the answer is there isn't much support for them at all. There are some online modules that have been designed to try and help, and CAMS, so child and adolescent mental health services clinicians are being trained to try and work with this group of young people as well, to sort of try and take some of the exceptionalism out of it, to just see a young person who's questioning their gender, but they're a young person as well, so to look at them in the whole. But it really isn't very positive if you're a young person with gender identity difficulties right now.
I guess the thing about these two new regional centres is we don't know how quickly they're going to be able to get through that quite large waiting list, do we?
No, absolutely, and it's not a secret that they've struggled to recruit staff, and I think one of the most senior figures in gender in NHS England said yesterday that they're not going to make a dent in that waiting list anytime soon. The initial caseload that they will be handed will be young people already under the care of the Tavistock, and no new people will come off the waiting list, is my understanding. So it's going to take a really long time for them to both recruit enough staff to take on an adequate caseload, to be trained in a new, less medical, well, non-medical, I suppose, holistic way of working. It's going to take a huge amount of time. And again, I say the people suffering here really are those young people who are in distress and need some help, but there's nothing available at all.
Good to speak to you this morning. Thanks very much, Hannah.
Thank you.
That's Hannah Barnes, Associate Editor at the New Statesman and author of Time to Think, which is a book about Tavistock's Gender Identity Service. We're going to talk to Cleo Madeline from the organisation Gendered Intelligence after 8 o'clock this morning. It's 14 minutes past 7.
In my opinion,